So good afternoon and a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the NIHR First seminar on public partnerships, hosted by First Connect. My name is Julia Jones. Next slide, please. My name is Julia Jones. I'm Professor of Public Involvement and Health at the University of Hertfordshire, and I'm the Co-Chief Investigator for First Connect. And I'm delighted to be co-chairing this afternoon with my colleague Amander Wellings. Amander, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Amander Wellings and I'm the public co-applicant on First Connect.
So we have a really exciting programme this afternoon. Next slide, please. So here you can see the timings and the different presentations that we have today. In a moment, I'm going to pass over to Amanda, who's going to talk about the UK standards for public involvement. We then have our first presentation from colleagues at First South Bank, and then from colleague Judy Kidger at First Insight. We will then have a 10-minute comfort break, and then we'll return to a third presentation before quite a lot of time for reflections, questions, discussion, and our shared learning. Next slide, please. So just some housekeeping before we proceed with the seminar. Unless you are speaking, please can you keep your microphone on mute and turn your camera off as well. We've got 99 plus people here today, so I think it helps with the presentations on Teams if when you're not speaking you have your camera off as well, if possible. Unless you're speaking, of course, our speakers, please keep your cameras on when presenting and also in the discussion section. During the 10-minute comfort break, please can you mute and turn your camera off again. The presentations, as you will have seen from the programme, will be running one after another, and then we have a lot of time for discussion and questions towards the end of the seminar. So please, if you want to post questions in the chat, and then we will try and get through as many questions as we can. So we have colleagues, First Connect, are looking at the questions in the chat, and then we'll get through as many as we can in the discussion section. The questions will be addressed, as many questions as we can, in the reflection and discussion session, and Amanda and I will be joined by the speakers and other colleagues from other Firsts who work particularly around the public partnerships. And this discussion session, it's a safe space for our reflection and our shared learning. And just to remind us all that the presentations today will be recorded and made available on the website, but we will not be recording the discussion, just so that everyone's aware of that. So I'm now going to hand over to Amanda, who's going to talk us through the UK standards for public involvement in research. Amanda, and next slide, please.
So hello everybody. I wanted to frame this seminar around the UK standards for public involvement in research, and they were co-produced and had a lot of work putting them together, and I was part of the original team that started doing that work way back when I was part of Involve, which was an organisation that supported public and patient involvement in research. So what I'm going to do in this is just sort of briefly talk through the standards. I don't think that you need to take it all in, because there will be a link to the standards at the end that you can share and you can look in more depth. But this, how we put this together is to try and get the standards to come to life with the work that we do in the First. So next slide, please. So how much at the moment do you know about the UK standards for public involvement in research? This is a live poll, and we've got 3 options: nothing, a little, or a lot. And we'd like you to answer the poll only once. It'll appear on the screen or in your chat. So just how much do you know at the moment about the UK standards?
Apologies, Amanda. I'm going to have to just close down the slideshow just for a second to launch the polling. Please give me a second.
Yeah, no problem. This is always the joy with technology.
Not a problem at all. So I'll launch the poll now. So
yeah,
please answer when it appears on your screen.
I'm going to give you the pre-registration documents, and the reason I think it's useful for you to do, even if you don't submit it, is that it helps you go through what your project will look like. If you do that now, when you come to this section here, the structural cognitive project report, when you come to look at that.
Can I just ask to make sure that everyone's mute, because I've got someone's telly in the background. So if you can make sure that you're on mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Well, it might be a radio, actually. One or the other. So, oh, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. Everyone's nearly in. So has everyone managed to vote yet? Peter, Chad, can you do it on the screen, please? Because the screen should have come up with the poll so you can tick your box. Because it won't register if it's just written in the chat. Yeah, we've got 91. Well, I think unless, because some people might be struggling to do it. So shall we call it closed at 91? I think we've got most people in. So the results that have come up is 33% say they know nothing, which is a brilliant place to start. 48% say they know a little. Well, that's another brilliant place to build on. So we hope that you have a little look into them after this and end up knowing what 18% of us already do is a lot. And I'll admit that I'm one of that 18%, obviously, because I co-authored them. So yeah, that's brilliant. So if you close that one, Imogen.
Yeah, that should be it won't close, but if people want to submit, they can do, but yeah, we can call it a close from there.
Yeah. And if you want to go in, can you do the next one? So the next one is, have you used the UK standards for public involvement in research? Yes or no? And that's again, when it's open, just clicking one of those boxes, yes or no. And we're coming up. Of course, it's nearly as exciting as election night, isn't it? So we're on 84. We'll give people a couple more seconds just to click in. Yeah, and as Anne Bowers says, it's looking like better results here for us. So we've got, if we call it now, we've got 30% saying yes, they have used them, and 30%, and 69% or 70% on the screen saying that they haven't. So yeah, that's brilliant. It's nice to know that so many of you are using them already, and the rest, it's just an idea that they are a really, really good resource. So next screen, please. You close the poll down. Oops. So are we all seeing just the one screen now with the standards are up? Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So as I said, I won't go deeply into these, but just these are the 6 standards. And one is around communication. So how we communicate to members of the public and how it should be done, and what we have to think about when doing communications well. These standards are all about gold standards. So it's about doing things to the best we can, with the capacity and the resources and the capability that we have. So if we don't totally hit them, it doesn't matter. But the aim is to try and hit them as much as we can. So communications, there's a list of things around communications as to how it could be made better when you're working with the public. Working together, again, that's how we work together well, and what should be in place for working together. Inclusive opportunities, that's about making sure that everybody has a chance to be involved in your research, and that's involvement in this case is about being part of the team, designing, carrying out, and actually being actively involved in your research, not necessarily participating. Like doing a questionnaire or being interviewed, but actually taking part as part of the research team. Impact, that's really important, because it's what's the point in doing public involvement if we don't measure the impact that it has on the studies. So in that standard, we look at ways in which you can measure impact. Governance, that's about how do you make sure that the public are included at the level of governance in your project. So like things like advisory groups and other levels of teams that you have, and make sure that they're embedded throughout all the structures that you have. And my baby, I must admit, is support and learning, because I was part of the learning and development team involved. So as I said before, I've written quite a lot of the actual guidance around how to do public involvement, and I've been doing public involvement and being involved as a service user carer at a high level for the last 20 years, which is why I'm really, really passionate to get it right. So that's a whistle-stop tour of these standards, and we'll be visiting them throughout this this seminar. So now I'd like to introduce our first piece in this, which is actually a video, and it's the work that Thomas Mills and James Grimes did in PHIRST South Bank. So if you'd like to start the video, that would be wonderful. Technology here, we're hoping there aren't going to be any gremlins, but we'll play the video.
Hello, my name's Tom. I'm based at PHIRST South Bank. I'm here with James Grimes of Gambling with Lives to talk about the different forms of impact in public health, the different forms of lived experience impact in public health research and practice, looking at the case of gambling-related harms. Okay, so just to set the scene, obviously, gambling-related harms is increasingly being recognised as a major public health issue. The harms are multifaceted, ranging from individual health impacts, impacts on families and the wider society at considerable social cost. Yet the actual national public health framework for gambling-related harm is underdeveloped in England, and there's been a kind of historic role for the gambling industry in the funding and delivery of health promotion, prevention and treatment services, and increasing recognition that is quite problematic in terms of the content of educational campaigns and treatment services and so on. And also, partly because of that historic role, there's major gaps in the public health evidence base in terms of actually preventing the harms from occurring. So the project, the local partner is Greater Manchester Combined Authority, who has sought to initiate a community response to gambling-related harms, exploring this with a view to raising all awareness and prompting action through a community of practice. So core research questions for the evaluation: how, for whom, and in what context does a community of practice facilitate understanding and action on gambling-related harm? But with a really important question, which is our objective, to assess the potential of lived experience to be actively involved in regional gambling-related harm reduction efforts and local interventions. So one of the things that the local partner has really prioritised and done is involve lived experience in all stages of development and delivery of this project in really interesting ways. And one of the things that we have sought to do in the evaluation is to assess the potential of that. Stop sharing there. It's great today to have James with us, who has been heavily involved in this project really from the start. James, do you want to give a bit of an introduction to yourself? And yeah, interested to hear how it all began for you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm James. First and foremost, I'm someone with lived experience of gambling harm. I had a 12-year gambling addiction, which started at 16 and finished at 28, but lucky to still be here because sadly so many don't recover from gambling addiction. Into my recovery, I founded a campaign called The Big Step to try and get gambling advertising and sponsorship out of football, and also became part of Gambling with Lives, which is a charity representing families bereaved by gambling related suicide, and that was 4 years ago. And at that stage of my life, I was just James, the recovering gambling addict, and I had these big ideas but didn't have the skills. I'm not from a public health background, that's for sure. I thought all I had was my lived experience, but I've actually come to learn that I can be involved in quite a lot. And it's been really helpful for my recovery. All of the work that I've done in my recovery has been mutually beneficial. It's helped my ongoing recovery, but also my recovery helps me do the work too, which has been really important. And I got involved with GMCA right at the start of this process at a conference. I was sitting on the table with a guy called Simon Watts, who started this whole process, and he asked, how should lived experience be involved? And at that moment, I said, at least listen to our views and get us involved from the very start. And that was the seed of GamHive. And I've been involved with that from the start up until this point too. And yeah, I've had many hats on during this process.
Thanks, James. You said, yeah, really listening to, that seems really important to that. And can you give us a sense of how they've listened, what they've kind of acted on, your advice on?
Yeah, I think that's the key point of it. It's never been for me just listen to your stories and think, oh dear, that's really sad, but we won't do anything about it. Actually, there's been a real how I see our input into this, which has been really useful, is like a critical voice and a voice on the ground from people that know what it's like to, be warned about gambling, try and access treatment, to be involved in policy change. All of those things have come through us, and we've provided, well, I hope we provided a critical voice. And that's not always the case. I'm involved in other lived experience advisory work and obviously involved in other organisations in this space. And a lot of lived experience involvement is tokenistic and box ticking. This, I can honestly say, hand on heart, has not been that, and that's a credit to GMCA, to Joe Evans in particular, but everyone involved, because we've said things and then seen things change the next time we meet that person. And I don't think you can ask for much more than that. Our views have been reflected, which is great.
So you said your many hats, you wear many hats, and one of those is with Gambling with Lives, and so that is one of the 12 community organisations who are involved in the project, and actually that educational intervention is lived experience led and informed, and it does something very different to the existing educational interventions, I believe.
Yeah, so gambling education in this country is still relatively new, and it doesn't come with much of an evidence base, but actually it's entirely dominated by organisations and materials that are funded directly by the gambling industry. We as Gambling with Lives are not. We have no partnership or influence by the industry at all, so would say that we are completely independent of industry influence. But it's not just about the relationship with the industry when it comes to education. Actually, what we do is we try to shift the narrative, and a lot of the focus in not just education but general prevention efforts when it comes to gambling are about individual responsibility, and it being up to young people to safeguard themselves from addictive products. We see it the other way around. We think it's up to governments, local authorities, regulators, the industry to protect people from harm caused by the product. So we of course don't rob agency from young people, and we try and give them the tools and the information and the hope and the help for if they do ever struggle. But we do also say that there's a reason why this is happening, and it's down to addictive products, mass marketing, unsafe practices, loose regulation. And we've been piloting those materials over the last year, mainly delivered by people with lived experience, which has also been quite powerful. And you can see when we're delivering it, there's moments, young people are young people, and when you first go in, they're like, oh, what's this, another talk about something that we shouldn't do. But then when they recognize one of us in the films that we've got, the penny drops, and they realize, this is someone that has gone through this is someone that has lived this. Actually, that's when you have their attention.
So that's James, with your education hat on, with your GAM Hive as well, because that message of we need to move beyond individual responsibility messaging. There's an increasing evidence base as well, suggesting that those kind of health messages are potentially stigmatizing, but also counterproductive. You're actually adding to the cues in the information environment to actually consume more. And one of your messages as a GAM Hive was to actually develop social marketing messages that did something very differently.
Yeah, so a lot of the messaging, once again, preventative messaging is dominated by the industry. It's basically owned by the industry. Like when the fun stop is the one that people may recognize. That is industry led. We as GAM Hive got the chance to input into what you can now see, which is the Odds Are They Win campaign. And that, for the first time, I think was quite pioneering in that it took a completely different approach, and it flipped it really to really get to the truth. And that the truth is that gambling harms a lot of people, and that the harms are widespread. And actually the fundamental message that I think I needed to hear at 16, 17 years old was that the gambling industry makes £14 billion a year. It does not do that by making lots of winners. Actually, 99% of the customers lose. The other 1%, by the way, get their accounts restricted or closed down. This is the industry you're up against. It's very, very, very hard to get what the adverts pretend that you will get out of that. So this was massive for us. And when it first came to us, it wasn't perfect, and there were a few problems. In all honesty, when we first received it, we thought these were gambling adverts. We didn't get the distinction, but it was another example of them really listening, because they came back with what you can see now.
Could I ask whether being involved in our evaluation as well has been interesting, helpful, whether you've taken anything or perhaps not?
It's been great. I'm not just saying that because you're on screen, Tom, but it's been really helpful. It's helped me really understand what public health interventions are like and how you measure whether they've been successful or not. These were all words that were not in my radar 2-3 years ago. So it's helped, and it's also helped me with the other projects I work on. So I talked about the education programme, in that we are shaping our theory of change and what impact we want to have. And these engagements have been really helpful, but also you just feel more, worthwhile. You feel like you're being actually consulted on things, and that there's times where I can see my words being reflected in material. That's always a nice feeling for someone with lived experience. So it's been another, really good example of engagement.
Just to reflect and finalise, we think there's a range of impacts on the research. So likewise, James, it's been great to work with you, because you brought that big picture perspectives really, and that's kind of enriched my understanding of the sector. I moved in to, I didn't have the previous understanding and experience in it, so having you there to provide that big picture. I think as academics sometimes we specialize a lot, and we kind of lose the big picture. So that's been really quite helpful for us, and we've drawn upon you as well as two other people with lived experience who sat on our PPIE panel, and that was really useful at all stages of our evaluation, from research design, developing topic guides with you and Colin, through data collection, analysis as well, involving you in that to really quite kind of draw out the themes and help us understand what the data is saying. It's been really helpful. So there's that, the impact on the research, impact on the people with the lived experience. So when you were talking there about actually how it had been intertwined with your recovery, and also your current journey in developing your career, and actually there's lived experience organisations, as you know, that are there to help public health organisations actually facilitate this. And then of course the impact on society, bringing in people into being involved in research without that formal training with James, for example, and also we haven't discussed this, but I know GAM Hive really achieved a lot of diversity, put a lot of emphasis on ensuring that diverse communities from around Manchester were represented, and also tied into some of the community organisations who were working with different ethnic groups to raise awareness and sharing those lived experience stories. So that's certainly an impact on society there. I think the key question is, how might this good practice in the gambling harms field be emulated in other sectors? And as part of that, I think in terms of our PHIRST research centres, whether interventions should be prioritised really for evaluation that have PPIE and LE embedded and really are taking it seriously, like Greater Manchester Combined Authority in this case, or if this is something that we really need to be working with local partners to develop. I think that's a key question.
Fantastic. What a brilliant video. Thank you so much to Thomas and James. We know that not everyone from PHIRST South Bank were able to be here today because there was a clash with another meeting, but I think that Joe Arnold and Susie Sykes are at the seminar and will be available to answer any questions and comments, reflections that people have in our discussion session. But fantastic example of partnership working and really demonstrating the standard of impact that the impact of the public partnership and the people with lived experience involved in that evaluation. So I'm now going to move on to our second presentation. Next slide, please. I'm delighted to welcome Judy Kidger, who's a senior lecturer in public health at the University of Bristol and PHIRST Insight, and Judy is going to talk about one of their evaluations and working with teenage co-researchers. Judy.
Great, thank you very much. Hi everybody, thanks for having me here today to speak. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, just to explain a little bit of background to the project that I'm going to be talking about today. So this was a project that we were given to evaluate universal free school meals in secondary schools in a London borough. So the background to the project is that we know there's rising levels of food insecurity across the UK, including in London. And currently, the system that exists in secondary schools is that if you reach a certain threshold, then you are eligible to receive free school meals. But we do know that a lot of families who are eligible don't claim the free school meals. We think one of the big reasons for that is around stigma, the stigma that young people feel by being kind of marked out in that way. But we also know that there are families that are kind of on the cusp who maybe aren't quite eligible for free school meals, but they're still experiencing a lot of food insecurity. So there is a problem at the moment with young people who are in need not always receiving enough nutrition. And even though universal free school meals has been introduced in primary schools in the UK, so in England that's just at infant school age, but Scotland and Wales are rolling it out across all primary school age. But of course, good nutrition remains important during adolescence as well. When you reach puberty and those big growth spurts, it can have huge implications for health longer term if you don't have appropriate nutrition at that point. So the project that we were invited to evaluate was universal free school meals being delivered in 2 secondary schools, one of which was a mainstream school and one was a special educational needs school. And we had 2 kind of main questions we were asking. The first is whether it's feasible and acceptable to deliver universal free school meals in secondary schools. And the second question was what the perceived impacts are as understood by the people involved in the free school meals. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we did to answer those questions, I'll tell you what we did overall, and then I'm going to focus in on one particular aspect. So we conducted a survey among the students at the 2 schools where we were measuring food insecurity and hunger, and we had 404 respondents to that survey. And from there, we then conducted interviews across the different stakeholders involved in the schools. So we managed to get interviews with 28 students across the 2 schools, 20 parents and carers, 8 school staff and catering staff in the 2 intervention schools. And then we also conducted interviews with 4 staff in other schools, other secondary schools in the same borough who weren't currently receiving the universal free school meals, to just explore a bit more that question of feasibility in particular. But then the main thing I'm going to talk about for the rest of this presentation is something we did where we engaged 24 students who acted as co-researchers with the research team, and what they were doing for us was observing their lunch times and taking notes and photos. We initially kind of thought about that partly for pragmatic reasons, to be honest. So we conducted this research during the pandemic where we couldn't go into the schools, and obviously we were based far away in Bristol anyway, but it was during the time that schools were restricted on the visitors that they would allow in. So this was a good way of kind of solving that, but of course it also gave us a really nice way to make sure we were involving public in the research. And there's a link there for people that are interested in any of the details about the study itself, because I won't say more about the study overall. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the way we worked with our student co-researchers, first of all, we had to agree a recruitment plan with the school leads, and we were obviously sort of reliant on the school staff to help us with that, which I'll say a little bit about later. But we ended up working with the students who were already on the school council in both schools. So we had an initial meeting with those students, and during that meeting we explained the study to them. We told them a little bit about research in general, which I'll come back to, and then we spent most of the time engaged in sort of different activities and discussion, where we first of all talked through with them what they thought was important at school lunchtime for students, and then we moved on from there to talk about how they might collect how they might collect data about that. So on the left-hand side, the kind of different words in colours there that have come up are the sorts of things they said were important at lunchtime for them. And that formed the basis of the content of what they then observed. So they talked about the quality of the food, portion sizes, the setup in terms of having round tables to sit round and be more sociable, queuing time, making sure they've still got free time during lunchtime after they've eaten, the diversity of the food, and having clean cutlery. So they were kind of the main things that came out of those discussions across the two schools. Then when we moved on, so we talked about how that would probably form the content of what they were observing. Then when we moved on to talk about how they might capture that information, we collectively agreed on this idea of a diary that they would complete. And so the writing there in green is what they identified as kind of methods that they were going to use. So they talked about the fact that they were generally happy to have some space to take notes, but they also like the idea of taking photos, but we talked through what they would and wouldn't take photos of. So we agreed no photos of students, but photos of things like portion sizes, plates of food. But the students talked about wanting to have tick boxes for people who didn't want to write. So they talked about having some choices about how they captured the data. They also wanted to do a bit more than observe. They talked about whether they could interview the lunch ladies. And so we talked about whether they could have something on their observation diary for that, but we agreed against that in the end. So then we talked about how as a team we could include interviews with the lunch ladies. So then the students gave some input into what we were going to ask them. And then the students also raised a couple of concerns about what they were being asked to do. So one was whether they would still have enough time for their own lunch. So we talked through how we could make sure that still happened. We talked about which teachers we would need to kind of arrange all this with. And the second point they made was whether they might feel embarrassed doing it. So we talked about what would help there, and we came up with a solution that if we let people in the school know what they were doing, then that would be okay. So with all that information, the research team then went off and produced a draft of the observation diary. Next slide, please. So we then came back, we had a second meeting with the same students. We showed them the diary that we'd created and talked that through, and the students had some additional suggestions, seeing what we'd come up with. So they wanted some of the space reduced to make it fewer pages. They felt it was a bit cumbersome, the idea of carrying it around with them. They wanted us to add an icon with a camera sign where they could take a photo, and they had some additional suggestions of questions that they could put in that they'd thought of, having had a bit of time to reflect. So we added those in. So we made the changes. The students then test ran the diaries and had one further suggestion based on the basis of that, which was that they would share the diary between two of them, and that meant one person didn't have to do everything. So one could take photos, one could write things. It also meant they could kind of get drinks and things if they wanted to. So we then produced the final version of the diary based on all of this feedback. Next slide, please. So this is just to show the sorts of things that the diary looked like. And actually, we did end up with a slightly different version between the two schools, and that was based on the special education school students. Once they started to see the draft of the diaries, had a preference that there'd actually be less room for writing, and they wanted it to be a bit more structured, so there weren't just lines and lines where they could write things, and they wanted a bit more tick boxes. So on the left hand side, that's the diary that the mainstream school went for. They were happy with quite a lot of room to write things. And on the right hand side, you can see we discussed with the students how to approach it. They still wanted the option of writing, so we put that line at the top where they could just write anything they wanted to at the end, and then where there was a bit of space for writing, we made it a bit more structured. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to then point out the standards that I think this work particularly illustrates. So working together, first of all, so we very much co-created the observation diaries based on the students' ideas, both for the content and the design. And it was very much that the students kind of led on the ideas, and we sort of tried to then create based on what they were saying and made sure we got their agreement. And Secondly, I also wanted to point out that the student researchers' data was valued and disseminated alongside the data collected by the research team. We ended up with 59 observation diaries in the end from them. I didn't say that the students observed over a whole week, so 1 observation a day. So we had a lot of data from our student co-researchers. They did a brilliant job. And specifically the sort of data we got from them that's been included in our dissemination, we got information from them about feasibility in terms of queues, what food was left for the people that came later, around acceptability, so things like the portion sizes, the choice, also things about the quality of the food, what was liked, food waste and how much was left on the plates, which we got from some of the photos. And also there was information about barriers to success that we didn't get elsewhere. So about things like what wasn't liked about the lunch break. And we learned from our student co-researchers actually that in one of the schools there was still an option to buy better puddings than the pudding that was on offer for free, which was information we hadn't previously realised, which we felt was really important when thinking about kind of how this works in practice. Next slide, please. So this is just to show one of the 2 publications, which is where our student observation data went into. So it went into the paper in this table format, and then we had some discussion about it. So yeah, just illustrating that the data our co-researchers collected was included in the same way that all the other data was included. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks. So the second standard I wanted to just pull out was around support and learning. We felt it was important in the sessions to do a little bit of light touch education about research more broadly, how to do it, why it might be important. And so we'd like to think that the students learned something about the value of research, but also hopefully particularly learned something about the value and enjoyment of being involved as a member of the public in research. So hopefully potentially lighting some sort of spark maybe in some of those young people in terms of them maybe going on and getting involved in other things in research. And hopefully also we gave the students the skills and confidence they needed to then plan and collect their research data. So they were they didn't feel they were being given a task that they didn't understand, but they were hopefully well equipped to do it. Just to say as well, in this slide, in the last couple, the photos are the photos that the students took. Okay, next slide. So the last standard I was going to pull out is inclusive opportunities. So thinking about the age, the fact that young people's voices aren't always heard or perhaps privileged as much as adult voices, it was really nice to have the opportunity to work with the young people as equals. But we really particularly valued the opportunity to work with students at a special education school. I think those of us who work in school-based research a lot are aware that a lot of research happens in mainstream education and doesn't always include special education schools, and that therefore means those students potentially get excluded from public involvement as well. So we really like the fact that we worked with them just as much as we were able to work with the students in the mainstream school. Last slide, please. No, I think it's the last slide. Next slide, sorry. So I just wanted to end with a few reflections really on the challenges of public involvement with school students. So there's the question around time, the fact that school timetables are really busy, but it's difficult to expect young people to kind of stay behind or meet us in their own time. So we're quite reliant on school gatekeepers really to kind of make this possible and to appreciate the value of what we're trying to do so that they're happy to give some time to it. And on that note of teachers being gatekeepers as well, we were very reliant on the teachers to recruit for us, which meant we didn't really have much negotiation opportunity there. We could say to them the sorts of young people we thought might benefit from this, but ultimately we were in their hands, and we were reliant on them as well to kind of organise, make sure it did happen, and also to return the data so that the good work wasn't lost. And the one sort of disappointment really was we talked to the students about going back to them at the end of the study and feeding back the difference that they'd made and what we'd learned from them. And we didn't manage to make that happen. And I think that was really, again, that was kind of on the teachers as gatekeepers. We kept sort of inviting them to try and find us a time that we could do it. But I think also there's maybe something about the timing. So our research maybe took a little while to pull it all together. And in the meantime, the schools have moved on. They're at a different point in their timetables. And it made it more difficult for them to kind of revisit it, I think. So that was a challenge. And I think also, which I think is a broader comment about FIRST work in general, that we're not always near the places that we're collecting the study data. So we don't we don't automatically have relationships and networks with the public in those areas. So that I think broadly we're all reliant on gatekeepers, whether those are in local authorities or whether they're in schools or wherever they may be. So I think that can be a kind of extra layer of challenge that we're all working with. Great, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Judy, and absolutely bang on time, fantastic, and so nice to hear about the involvement of children and young people in a FIRST evaluation as well. There's some questions that are coming through now in the chat that we will take through to our discussion session. Thank you all to our presenters who've presented in this first hour. We now have a 10-minute comfort break. If we come back at 2:01, can I please ask that you put your mute on and turn off your camera? I see in the chat that some people have been having a few issues with their slides. Margaret, we're now recording for the next presentation. Thank you all for your comments and questions in the chat. We've got some great questions to ask Judy a little later in this hour. Thank you, Peter Shave, for saying so far so good, fascinating and inspiring. Thank you. That's some nice feedback to start our second hour. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce my colleagues, Amander, Wellings and Sian Harding, who are colleagues from FIRST Connect, and they're going to be talking about, next slide please. And Amanda and Sian are going to talk about Sian's involvement journey in FIRST research, and what a great title, Involvement Journey First Class. Over to Amanda, thank you.
Yeah, hello again everybody, and I'm hoping it is a first class journey, but then again this first is a totally new experience. And it's also a totally new way of having to do public and patient involvement, because these studies are very, very short. And as a few people have already pointed out, there's huge geographical challenges as well. So, as I said, I'll introduce myself. My name's Amander Wellings. I introduced myself at the beginning. I'm the public co-op with FIRST Connect, which basically means that I, alongside Julia Jones, organise all the public involvement across our FIRST. And I'm happy to be co-presenting with one of my members of the FIRST Connect PIRG, Sian. Thank you, Sian.
Hello, my name's Sian Harding, and as I'm sure you'll guess, I'm from South Wales. Who would have thought, who would even imagine that when I went to the doctors because I'd pain in my joints and ended up enjoying being a member of the FIRST Connect PIRG?
Yeah, thank you, Sian. So next slide, please. This slide is basically talking about how we actually structure our involvement across FIRST Connect. It started off, there's a university-wide public involvement in research group in Hertfordshire Uni, which is where we're based, and they had input into the application form to actually apply to get the first funding. So then out of that group, and from people who work in the teaching at Hertfordshire University, we then set up a FIRST Connect public involvement in research group, and that's chaired by myself, and there's 8 diverse members on that group at the moment, some with existing research experience and some like Sian with none. I just plucked her out of the community. So and as well, we have project specific public voice groups, or we go to existing service user groups for consultation. We try and put public involvement in every stage, so co-produced research, questions, data collection, even somewhere around the initial ideas stages, even though a lot of the ideas of what people want to research is already formed, but we still come in at initial stages as well, and data collection, data analysis, dissemination, communication and impact activities. So next slide, please. So, oh, we haven't got any more slides. I don't know why I said next slide, please, because the whole idea of this is to not be deaf by PowerPoint. So what we're going to do in this is to try and bring the standards to life. So it's going to be a chat between me and Sian, really, so as we can bring out how First Connect do the standards. If people can turn their cameras off if they can, who are in the background, that'd be great. If you know how to do that, just switch your camera. Thank you. So yeah, we're Sian actually started by being a participant and being interviewed in one of our evaluations. And then she became a member of our public voice group after seeing a flyer invite that was sent out. Then after she became a member of our public voice group, I headhunted for her for our First Connect public involvement in research group. She had skills with children and young people, being an ex-teacher and also a family carer, including for a grandson with autism. I had space on my group as someone who dropped out due to ill health, and we still have 8 very involved diverse people on the group. So now we're going to try and bring the standards to life for you. So the first standard we want to look at is communication. So how do you think we do in communicating with you, Sian?
Well, as a new member of the First PIRG, I'm totally new to research and all this strange language and acronyms. It's been a very steep learning curve. I was really pleased to get regular feedback from researchers on anything I've done and to be told that my contribution is valued. I also feel that I am adding value to the project, making the researchers think and understand other viewpoints. Our super admin, Margaret, always sends out printed or emails agendas and minutes in plenty of time, and she always sends out reminders whenever necessary. So the communication has been excellent.
Thank you, Sian. So now we'll swiftly move on to another one because we're going to do all 6. So support and learning. So in the beginning, all our people that are involved with us, apart from the consultancy groups in the areas, but our public voice group and our public involvement in research group have all had an induction based on the National Institute of Health Research Starting Out brochure, which I co-authored at my time when I was working with Involve. So what training have you received then, Sian, with us?
All right, Amanda. Well, when I started, I had an induction session with Julia and yourself, who introduced me to public involvement in research. It was made clear to me in induction there's no such thing as a stupid question, and that my lived experience and my role as a critical friend is valuable, which is very important. I was given training by the researchers before I carried out coding of questionnaires and carried out a literature review. I attended training sessions on diverse dissemination that was very interesting. But it's very easy to succumb to imposter syndrome, which means that I have difficulty believing that what I do is good enough. And although I taught for 20 years, being new to PPI and research is quite daunting. However, I know that I can always ask for clarification from Julie or Amanda if I'm unsure. And I'm really looking forward to getting together face to face with all the people I meet in the meetings for the writing workshop that has been organised in May in Hearts.
You also got some good IT support from Hearts. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I certainly did. Initially, I was given a Hertfordshire email address and staff number so that I could access IT support that was available at the end of a telephone. This was essential as I had a lot of problems with compatibility between the operating systems. The problems were sorted out quickly and efficiently. I telephoned them up, they answered at the end of the telephone, and they sorted it out online. So that made a huge difference to the way I could interact with Hearts University.
Yeah, it's often very difficult for service users because we come with our own computers and sometimes antiquated software. So as we actually can interact well and communicate well, that all has to be sorted out. And this seminar is obviously another chance for learning and development from each other across the FIRSTs and from people outside the FIRSTs, I'm hoping. So now we move on to impact. We started off a public and patient involvement log from the start, and we'll be writing up a paper about the impact of the FIRST Connect to PIRG's 5 years. We have all the feedback given to PPI members in that log. Also, blogs about working in communities have already been done, and we've got outputs from PPI in the first 2 studies on the website, including creative outputs like poetry and artwork. A PPI section is included in many of the reports that have to go back to the NIHR, so you have to do it. So to keep a log from the start is a good thing. So that's how we're going to assess the impact. And we've also assessed the impact going along, so always reported back to our people what we've learnt from them and what we've done with their information. So loads of feedback throughout. So we'll move on to working together. We have team meetings, we co-create resources, we have monthly PIRG meetings with space for open reflection discussions. If things are not working, we can change it. And I'm well open to changing how we work together in this FIRST because it's all new. PIRG members now report back on the studies they're working on, and we have 2 members embedded in each study. How is it for you, Sian, around working together?
Right, well, we work together in the team meetings, and it's very useful to have the space for open reflection. As Amanda said, 2 members of the team are embedded in each study, and we attend all the meetings and feed back to the monthly PIRG meeting. I have felt that at some of the project meetings I've attended, when the team are discussing complex issues such as systems dynamics or modelling and momentary analysis, I couldn't contribute meaningfully, so I decided not to attend. However, I'll be much more actively involved when the journal article is ready, and I'll be sense checking and making sure it can be read and understood by a lay person such as myself. But I have been involved right from, well, not right from the start, but throughout the project.
Yeah, and what we do is any dissemination is reviewed by at least the public involvement in research group, and sometimes it's reviewed by the public voice group and the members in the locality as well that we're working with. So we're now gonna move on to inclusive opportunities and how we hit that. At the moment, we're now going on to having evaluations and actually being able to put the public and patient involvement in right from the start. So how has it been for you being involved from the start with a new project we've got coming up?
Right. Well, I've been involved in this one project right from the start, and I really feel I can contribute meaningfully to all of the aspects. Being involved in the public voice group as well will also give me a deeper understanding of how the partnerships work. And I feel that I've been able to contribute meaningfully to the project and have given a lay person's point of view. Also, the researchers' feedback has been very positive, which is very important when you put it in the work.
Yeah, and it gets rid of that imposter syndrome that I keep telling her. I keep telling her it's not needed and she's brilliant, but it rears its little head every now and again, bless her. So, and when we go in and do the consultancy workshops in the areas in which we're working in, we send out accessible invites, and anybody that's working in a group can come and join in our our consultancy workshops, and they're normally around sense checking of results. And so they have one where they read through the results, they give us their ideas on it, and then we go back and we tell them what we've done with their ideas, and we go and do some arty things, and we've had photograph competitions, and we've written poetry and done loads of different things. So there are a few barriers though to PPI. So one obviously is geographical distance. So Sian, do you want to talk a bit about your barriers that you've had to PPI?
Yeah, well, technological advances obviously have allowed me to be involved with Hertfordshire University, even though the geographical distance and restricted mobility would have precluded my involvement prior to this. I have moderate hearing impairment, and subtitles and closed captions have been invaluable, if a little confusing when words are incorrectly recorded, because it does make for quite some amusement. All in all, I feel I enjoyed being involved as a member of the First Connect PIRG, and it has been a steep learning curve made easier with the help and support of Amanda, Julia, and everybody that I've been involved with.
Thank you very much, Sian, for your time and your willingness to do this. And the last sort of one that I'd like to talk about slightly is governance. We have regular team meetings, as we said, and our PPI members are invited to the team meetings of the projects that they're now embedded on. We have advisory groups for the projects, which our team members, our PIRG members are invited on. And now we're putting members of the community onto the advisory groups as well with support. And all this support and all this organisation and all this new ideas come from the PIRG themselves, come from the people in the community, and come from myself and Julia Jones, the PPI Professor of Herts Uni, who's co-chairing this with me. So thank you very much for your time, everybody. And any questions, please put in the chat.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Sian. Thank you so much for your honesty. And Sian, you've gone from never being involved in research to being part of a seminar, a national seminar. So many congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've now come to the end of the presentations. We are now going to stop recording.